All right, guys. Hi, hello. Welcome back. What we're doing today is we're going to continue talking about Nixon. In your notes, there's not quite as many notes today. It's just going to be focused on the Watergate scandal. I've got some notes to kind of set the scene for this, and then I have a complex series of dates or timeline about how the Watergate scandal plays out. You're going to notice that once I get going here and once I get into the timeline, then nothing is highlighted. And well, again, it's your call if you want to put all of the dates into your notes or not. Again, the first slide has kind of the setup, and then it also has the why is it important. It is good to understand the different parts of what happens throughout the Watergate scandal, having a general idea. So it's kind of your call how you want to approach it. At the end of today, I've got work to be completed. Again, we're still no official homework stuff yet. Our first thing is going to be a little our activity tomorrow. I have also posted along with this PowerPoint, again, a kind of a sum up video. And the thing about Watergate, it is a really complicated situation. And I could probably spend weeks just dissecting all of the ins and the outs of it. But that's not going to be helpful to you in the long run. So, and just follow along with this as best you can. Take the notes that you think are necessary, and then that'll be it for the day. Okay, so notebooks out again in our unit 6, 70s, 80s. Okay, so we're going to set up for scandal here. All right. So, as a result of the various massive crises that our country has gone through in the first half of the 20th century, Great Depression, World War II, and the Cold War breaking out, our executive branch of the American government and the president, it is transformed into the most powerful position ever. If you look back, if you become a poli-sci major and you look back at the kind of evolution of American government, by this moment, the president is wielding power in a way that is much more similar to an emperor or a king, kind of doing whatever they want and not taking into consideration that they are being told no by the Congress or they're being told no by, again, the Supreme Court and so on and so forth. And well, that's great in regards to Nixon because he loves power. He loves the fact that as president that he can do whatever he kind of wants. And while he is in the White House, he is never shy about the fact that he thinks that presidents should be above the rest. The thing about our government is that was never supposed to be the case, that the elected president, whoever they might be, is still just a citizen of the United States. And the powers that they're given are given by the people, and that, again, if they were to break a law, the president would be facing the same consequences as anyone else. Yeah, Nixon didn't agree with that. And he became president at a time where it did kind of seem like the president was untouchable. And he increased the amount of power that a president can have and how they can wield it. I mean, the fact that it comes out later. We don't know this at the moment, but he is going to impound money for programs, aka he's going to freeze it and use it for other things. He invades Cambodia without permission. I mean, he time and time again is going to abuse the powers given to him through his position, his elected position of president. And his sort of egomania, because that's really what this is not helped by the fact that he has a group of men surrounding him who are fiercely loyal and just love the fact that their friend has all of this power. This group, who are going to become known as President's Men, this little gang of sorts are a bunch of different advisors to Nixon who, like I said, fiercely loyal, are fine with him doing whatever he wants, and they're just along for the ride, right? These four men, there's more of them. These are the four men you need to know by name. There's H.R. Haldeman, Chief of Staff. He runs the office for Nixon. You've got John Ehrlichman, chief domestic advisor, so the guy who is helping him make decisions about what to do in country. John N. Mitchell, who was the former attorney general, now just another advisor, and then John W. Dean III, who is the presidential counsel. Lots of Johns. Okay. So these four guys are sitting around the president and they're just saying yes. And that does a lot to somebody's ego. It swells it even more. They're never going to question him. They're just going to say, yes, 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 whatever you say. They develop this sort of inflated sense of self that they can get away with whatever. They're above the law. They're just doing what they got to do. Of course, this all blows up in their face. And the next two slides is the breakdown of how this all goes wrong for, again, Nixon and his president's men. So we're going to kind of talk about it in a lot of detail in a second. Before we go through the ins and the outs of the Watergate scandal, I am going to give you the why is it so important? What is the end result of all of this craziness that's about to go on for the next handful of years? The end result here is that we as a population are even more critical and more suspicious of our government and our leaders. The credibility gap that started during during the Vietnam conflict continues to get bigger. That the president and that the government are not telling us everything, and they are trying to get away with stuff that, man, oh man, it just makes us upset. It makes us, as a population, just that much more suspicious of everything that they do. Are they really telling us things? Are they keeping things from us? Are they doing what they're supposed to? Of course, another end result here is that what a president is allowed to do and not do gets reevaluated once again. Again, there's going to be sort of shifting in some laws and some different sort of acts and policies. You don't have to know them by name, just know that the president is going to get knocked down a couple pegs in regards to this because of this scandal. And then the last piece is it sets up a new precedence for future impeachments. And we'll talk about impeachment a little bit later on. We've talked about it before, not since the mid 1800s. But again, a president to be impeached is to hold them accountable for the laws that they break, which Nixon did plenty of. So we're going to get into it. All right. So this is my slimmed down, straightforward timeline of how Watergate plays out. Okay. So this all revolves around an event that takes place in June of 72, early June, mid-June. And what ends up happening is that five men are caught breaking into the campaign headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. Okay. This happens to be at the Watergate Hotel. Mystery solved. What is Watergate? It's about the hotel, okay? What the plan was here is that these five guys were going to go into the DNC's headquarters, again, photograph their strategy of what the Democrats plan to do in the election of 72, place wiretaps and bugs on all the telephones, so on and so forth. These five men, through evidence and investigation, are linked to the committee to reelect the president, which was headed up by John Mitchell, one of the president's men. Right. This arrest, of course, takes place in, again, mid-June 72, and well, it's a huge mess. This big cover-up starts to happen. Again, the president's office and this committee to reelect the president start shredding documents. The five guys who are arrested are going to be put out on bail, and they get offered a bunch of different, again, bribes to be quiet and not to tell anybody what happened and how this all goes down. But this doesn't go away. It actually becomes more and more controversial after the election is done. Okay. So as more information comes out regarding this burglary and the Democratic Party continues to push to hold someone accountable for this, the trial begins. Okay. The full-scale investigation, bringing up charges against various different people in the Nixon administration, trying to hold someone accountable for this overall idea. The investigation is not just the burglary. That's pretty straightforward. It's the cover-up that is being investigated. How much is being, again, what connections are there, so on and so forth, right? It gets messy really fast. I'm just going to put all this up here so that I don't have to keep clicking. Okay. It gets messy pretty fast through lots of legalese and lots of investigating. It comes out that there's been a lot of lying going on the stand. March 20th, 1973, the leader of this little gang of 5 guys informs the judge that he lied under oath, right? He perjured himself in front of the court, saying that he didn't know who hired them and they didn't know again why and so on and so forth. They lied and lied and lied. And in his new testimony, which of course gets him in trouble for lying, he is going to hint that there were some higher up officials in Nixon's administration involved. He does not name Nixon at that moment, but he does start to make it the suspicion known that there is something more nefarious going on here, and Nixon is possibly involved. About a month or so later, Nixon is going to fire one of his president's men, John Dean. And then he announces the resignations of all the rest of them, right? When he does this, it's looked at as it's a pretty suspicious sort of maneuver here. After he fires his closest advisors, he goes on TV. Again, this whole thing is covered on television every day. It's like the leading news story for an entire year. And he denies that he had anything to do with this cover up, that he had any knowledge of it, telling the American public, reassuring the American public. He appoints his own special prosecutor to investigate, to figure out what the truth is, so on and so forth. The next month, the Senate is going to put in their own investigation together. This investigation, of course, is much more directed to trying to find a connection between Nixon and this cover up. It investigates him specifically. The following month, something very dramatic happened. John Dean, who'd been fired by Nixon, who had been by his side for years, he testifies. He goes on the stand, puts his hand on that Bible, and he is the first person to name officially that Nixon was heavily involved in this burglary and cover-up attempt. Sets the whole nation into a tizzy because by 1973, we already are pretty suspicious of our president and our government. And this is just fueling or fanning the flames of our suspicion and our, again, sort of questioning that's going on, right? In the following month, we're going to see another kind of big bombshell drop in this investigation in July. Alexander Butterfield, who had been working in the Nixon administration, revealed that Nixon taped all of his conversations. This was not an uncommon thing for presidents to do. LBJ also taped everything that happened in the Oval Office. Nixon, of course, had never told anyone and never shared that information with the public that he had been recording all his conversations in the Oval Office. When he was obviously questioned about this, he just said, well, I record them to be able to help write my memoir someday. Yeah, this, of course, puts us into a weird situation because if Nixon had nothing to do with this whole thing, he could very easily just produce the tapes to be listened to so that people can figure out whether he ever talked about it, if he knew these people or if he knew what was happening, so on and so forth. He is going to kind of dance a little bit with the investigation for a handful of months where he just kind of is like, oh, well, I'll get them to you. I'll have my people listen to them, figure out which ones would be relevant, so on and so forth. Yeah, it's not until October that the investigation is very much like, hey, get us these tapes, please, and thank you. It's a demand now as opposed to a request. When the investigation demands that Nixon turn over his tapes, a day referred to as the Saturday Night Massacre goes down. Nixon doesn't actually kill anybody, but he throws a huge hissy fit where he refuses to hand over the tapes. He fires like most of his staff, a bunch of high-ranking administration individuals, so on and so forth. And things just get muddier and more difficult. In that same month, Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, has to resign because it is found out that he'd been accepting bribes. So the corruption in the Nixon administration is just it's just really becoming much more large scale. This, of course, has a very interesting impact on our future because it does promote Gerald R. Ford, who was the Speaker of the House, to the vice president position through the lines of succession. So now we've got a new vice president in October of 73. The dancing and again, so on and so forth continues. Nixon does eventually provide tapes to the investigation. The tapes, though, are edited in a lot of ways. There's pieces missing, things that are not going, again, not shown, dates are gone, so on and so forth. Names are kind of like edited out, so on and so forth. In March of 74, people start to get charges, being actually arrested for things: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, perjury, the lying under oath. And then in July, well, things get even crazier because now the Supreme Court's involved and they order that Nixon release unedited versions of the tape. Again, 3 days later, a committee is going to approve impeachment, which, of course, impeachment is not to remove a president from office. It is to put him officially on trial for, again, crimes that he's committed. The things that Nixon would be accused of and then put on trial is obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress, which is basically refusing to cooperate. A handful of days later, Nixon releases the tape. But it is very obvious that there are huge chunks of these tapes just gone. He says that they were accidentally erased, and it's all so shady. 3 days after that, Nixon resigns. He just quits before he can actually be impeached. So Nixon is not impeached. He's not one of the 3 presidents that have been impeached at this point. So before they can even put him officially, again, to say whether he is guilty or if he's innocent, he ducks out. He's like, goodbye. Of course, very famously throughout this whole process, Nixon claims to be innocent, to not have broken the law, to be not responsible for the things that had happened, so on and so forth. Of course, his most famous speech revolves the quote, "I am not a crook," which is to this day questionable. And to this day, Nixon still denies having done anything wrong while president. And well, to this day, and up to the day he died, so on and so forth. And we as a nation lived through a year and a half, even more so than that, of craziness in regards to the government. It's a very odd couple of years in the United States when it comes to the federal government. And again, if your parents grew up at this time, I would ask them about it. I'm sure that they got some interesting opinions, or their parents had some very interesting opinions about this. Okay. That's it. That's all we're talking about today is just Watergate. Keep checking Google Classroom. Again, for lectures and assignments, reminders, all that kind of stuff. Remember, you could still technically submit your local history part 2 today as a late submission. Again, if it's done before 3 p.m. today, you're going to get just 5 points off. If it's after today, we're looking at 10 points, then 15, then 20. I won't accept anything after 3 p.m. on Friday. Please email me with questions, and I hope you guys have a good day.